Hi, welcome to Principles of Economics Macro. We have a new edition this semester, the 10th edition of Mankiw's Principles of Economics. As you know, we will be covering chapters 24 through 33. This is a change in terms of the chapter numbers. So in some of these videos, you're going to see me refer to the chapter as one less than where you're at. And I did this because time was really closing in on me. And I am re-recording some of the videos that I think need to be updated in terms of the content. So bear with me, but do look at whatever follows the chapter numbers. So if I'm talking about chapter 24, when in fact it's 25, but as long as it's consumer price index, it's going to be the same. So I appreciate your understanding and patience on this as I work to get all of these videos updated. And thank you, and I hope you enjoy. As always, please don't hesitate to contact me via the email in Canvas if you have any questions. Welcome, and please let me know if you need any help. Thanks.
Hi, and welcome to Chapter 24, Learning Objective 5. And this is our last learning objective for Chapter 24. We have a couple of different things that we're going to do in this chapter, all related to inflation. So let's get at it. So the first objective is we want to learn how to take economic variables and compare them for different years, isolating the fact that inflation happens. So we're going to talk about how to do that. So the second one is to explain indexation. Remember, indexation is the idea that we have cost of living adjustments in certain contracts. And if your contract goes for more than a year, you definitely want to have something like that built in. The last objective is to take a look at the difference between real and nominal interest rates. Nominal interest rates are the interest rates that you're quoted, but there's the real portion. Especially if you're investing money, we want to know exactly how much you're earning aside from inflation. If you're paying interest, then if you have a variable rate interest, that may go up or down based upon what the inflation rate is. So let's go ahead and jump into these objectives. So Super Bowl, inflation or cost, and I actually have some data for this. So this gives you a good example. So in 1967, a Super Bowl one ticket cost $12, and in 2012, it cost $1,200. And my question for you is this inflation or is this the cost of production? So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. So how do we compare different figures for different time periods? And it makes it difficult. If you've ever had a conversation with an elder relative, they often tell you how cheap things were when they were younger or how much they earned, much more, and how much their first house cost. So if you've ever had those kind of conversations, now you can kind of look at how it's you want to take a look at inflation because that's what matters. So here's an example. We have the minimum wage. It was $1.25 in 1968. It was $8.90 in December of 2017. So did the minimum wage have more purchasing power in 64 or 2017? So this is, again, a person that worked in 1968 saying, I made $1.25, but everything was cheap. And then a person from 2017 saying, well, I make $8.90. And perhaps the person from 68 says, you make too much. But again, we're going to take a look at how we would do this. There's a couple of pieces of information that we need. We obviously need the dollar amounts in the different periods. And then we also need the consumer price index for 1968, and we need the consumer price index for 2017 in this example. So essentially what we're going to do, we have the consumer price index in 68. Okay, that's your T here. And then the consumer price index in 2017. Okay. The minimum wage is from the oldest year, in this case 68, is what we're going to manipulate. And we're basically going to take, so let me show you, we're going to take the consumer price index in 2017 divided by the consumer price index in yesteryear, okay, then multiply that by yesteryear's price. So you can see that the $1.15 accounting for inflation would be $7.78. And we were comparing it with $8 and what did I have? $8.90. So yes, people are more overpaid in 2007. Make sense? We'll look at a couple other examples. But again, we want to look at this technique to use time series and kind of doing it backward, if you will, because of inflation. Okay? All right. So here's the question. Compute the 2013 value of a Super Bowl ticket. The consumer price index in 1967 for Super Bowl was 33.4. The price in 1967 was $12. The consumer price index in 2012, because that's the easiest one I could get, is 687.761. And the price in 2012 was $1,200. So the first thing we're going to do is hold this $1,200 off as our comparison amount. We don't really do any math with that. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to take the consumer price index in 2012, divide that by the consumer price index in 1967, multiply that by $12, and that will give us what a Super Bowl ticket should cost if we just simply account for inflation. We don't talk about the rise in the cost level. So when we do this, we end up with, let's see, let me put it in actual numbers, 687.761 divided by 33.4, which gives us a factor of 20.5916. And we're going to multiply that by our $12. And so a Super Bowl ticket in 2012 should cost $247.10 with rounding. Yet it costs $1,200. So the question, is this inflation? No. I mean, some of it is, obviously, but most of it is cost related. And I don't think it's any surprise when we talk about how much a 30-second spot in the Super Bowl in 2012 cost. Or I'm sorry, 2019, it cost roughly $5.6 million for 30 seconds. And so you could reach 98.2 million viewers. And so we take a look at what is our cost. There is roughly $17.54. You need everyone watching a Super Bowl commercial to go out and spend that much money in order for you to recoup your cost. Kind of interesting when you look at it overall. So much of the Super Bowl ticket is demand driven and cost driven. All right. Here's another one, the annual tuition and fees at public four-year colleges and universities. When I went to college, a semester was about $1,414. Consumer price index 109.6. 2016-17, the cost was $5,834 and the consumer price index was 203.8. After adjusting for inflation, who pays more? Well, I don't think this is any big surprise to you as college students. But again, we're going to use that same kind of ideology. We're going to take the most recent year's CPI of 203.8. We're going to divide that by the older CPI, in this case, 1986. And then we're going to multiply that by the $1,414. We're going to use this number here, the 5,834, as a check figure. When we do that, we end up with, it should cost in 2016-17, $2,629. Yet it costs considerably more than that. And if you're interested in why, there's a whole 33 1/3 model, and a lot of it has to do with tax implications and so on. But these are things that you study when you do a PhD. Woo-hoo. Okay. Indexation. Again, remember, some things change based upon indexation, inflation. So if inflation goes up, then automatically your return can go up. If you're indexed in a contract, for example, and you're doing work, and the return that you make on that, the profitability will go up. However, if you do an adjustable rate mortgage or an ARM mortgage, if the inflation goes up, so too does the amount that you're going to pay. So it's not necessarily the best way to go. Okay, so again, multi-year labor contracts, Social Security payments, and some federal income tax brackets. If you really want to know what indexation is, and I took this from a law review, and I thought it was kind of interesting because it says that it's not automatic, but it will the first time at the expiry of the first year. Okay, now I often say if you're going to receive a stream of payments over time, for example, things like child support should be indexed. If you're receiving alimony, that should be indexed, because you'll get a judgment, and that judgment will not keep purchasing power over time. Our last objective is to talk about real and nominal rates. And as you saw in the intro, the formula here is just that the nominal interest rate that you're given or you receive is equal to the real rate plus inflation. And we'll play around with that a little bit, because if we subtract inflation from both sides, then we end up with the real rate is equal to the nominal minus inflation. Remember, nominal always means that it has inflation in it. So we can change this around a little bit as well. So again, nominal is not corrected, but the real is corrected. And this is what I want you to remember for the test right here, is how we get to the real rate. Again, is just by subtracting that inflation from both sides of the equation. So here's an example. You deposit $1,000 for 1 year. The nominal interest rate, so that has inflation in it, is 9%. During that year, inflation is 3.5. What's your real rate of interest? So we're going to take 9%, because that's our nominal interest rate, is equal to the real rate plus 3.5%. So if we subtract 3.5% from each side of the equation, how about 5.5%? That's your real rate of interest. We're going to talk more about that because it's interesting that you're taxed if this is a gain. So if it's a capital gains tax, and we would like to think we're taxed at the 5.5, the answer is not. We're taxed at the 9. So this is why we say inflation is sometimes difficult, because it has inflation in it, which makes it look like you're earning more than you actually are. Okay, here's the nominal interest rate and the real interest rate, and I pulled this out of the Fed as well. And just to take a look at the comparison between nominal interest rates and real interest rates, this mark up here, this, black line, but you can see that the real interest rates have been extremely low during some periods, particularly of high inflation. All right, so that's the end of this learning.